I'm Colt Stevens from C. Stevens Gunworks. The following video you're going to see is an archive of my earlier work. Some of these earlier videos of mine have some great information that I really wanted to repost and preserve. So I hope you enjoy the content and I hope you learn something from this video. Today we're going to be answering some YouTube channel comments. Over the years in doing this on YouTube, I've gotten a fair number of comments. A lot of them I've done an exhaustive text reply, but some of them were just kind of funny or humorous, or some of them even make a good video to respond to. I've done a couple viewer-inspired videos like the 15 Owner's Manual. That one was good enough that I did a whole video off of it. I always try and answer your comments in some form or fashion. I've even had people contact me about firearms we've advertised in our videos. But some that I haven't responded to are just kind of humorous, or other people had answered them before I got around to it. So today I have collected some comments that I'm going to try and answer as best I can. Some are just kind of funny, but we'll see what we can come up with here. The first one I have here says, I'm new to shooting and keep hearing about ballistic coefficient. What even is that? My friend said it's for nerds. Ballistic coefficient is a term for how well the projectile or bullet handles drag, like aerodynamics. This is more important for long-range shooting, especially if you push your guns out to like 1,000 yards. 6.5 Creedmoor was developed with a very high ballistic coefficient in mind. Things like 50 BMG. The closer you get to a ballistic coefficient rating of 1 means it's very aerodynamic and it flies without any kind of residual drag that can be mitigated by having more of an elongation of the projectile or sharper angles, things like that. When this person says it's for nerds, it kind of is, but it doesn't make a big difference if you're shooting something like 5.56 or anything down to like 200-300 yards. When you get into bigger stuff like 308, any of the larger, longer range, like 30-06, 300 Win Mag, that's when ballistic coefficient really makes a difference. It kind of goes hand in hand with how well the projectile is manufactured. Higher ballistic coefficient projectiles are a little bit more expensive. You kind of pay for that better ratio. We'll move on to the next one. This person asks, how many rounds should I stockpile for when a zombie apocalypse starts? 500, 5,000, I'm panicking. So this is really dependent on what caliber you're looking at. When they say 5,000, that would be typical if you had something like a 22 LR, 22 Magnum, something like that. 500 is probably reasonable for like handgun stuff, 9mm. Really more is better, especially like when we've had the big runs on ammunition where you run out. There was a couple years, especially when COVID first started, we couldn't get hardly any kind of common ammo. The only thing on the market was like 40 S&W, 357 SIG, kind of oddball, non-mainstream cartridges. I would recommend probably like 1,000 per caliber if you're doing something like that and more mainstream. Mix and match some. For my rifle calibers, I would keep like 1,000 of each. If it's something more expensive, like a 30-06 or 300 Win Mag, that's where I'd do more like 500. I would at least keep 200 even if it's like an expensive cartridge. I have a 9.3x62 Mauser. I keep minimum 200 because I don't know if that will continue to be imported or if it'll just dry up. Things like 7.7 Japanese, there's pretty much only one time of the year I can buy that. There's a company called Graf & Sons that I buy that from. But once that supply is gone, it's just feast or famine on those. But more mainstream, 500 to 1,000 is reasonable. Like I said, 22 LR, 22 Mag, more like 5,000. The next question is, why do so many gun owners name their guns? Mine's just Steve, no shame. I don't know why people name their guns. I've always thought that was kind of funny. A lot of new gun owners do that. There's a particular person I remember that used to come into the store. She bought her first shotgun from us, and she named every gun that she had, and I always thought that was kind of funny. Their guns are inanimate objects. They're tools, so I personally wouldn't name guns. I guess it's kind of like you name airplanes, like back in World War II, they used to paint the names on the airplanes. I guess that's kind of the same idea. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I do find it kind of humorous. Next question is a 22 LR rifle worth buying just for cheap practice, or should I save up for a real gun? If you've never owned a gun, I definitely recommend getting a 22. My Aunt Mary, actually, I'll name names, we got her to shoot one of my 22 LR rifles, and she had never really shot a whole lot of guns. In fact, I think it would be safe to say she was a little bit scared of guns. But we had her shooting my 1022 Ruger with a scope on it and a 25 round BX-25 magazine with a bipod, so she could just sit down and shoot it at a range, indoor range. I think that transformed her, the way that she looked at guns, really. If somebody's really scared of guns, they don't like the noise, they don't like the pop, they don't like the recoil, 22 LR is a great way to get people invested in shooting and interested in the hobby. I definitely recommend, like, if you have kids that you want to get into shooting. I know I shot guns when I was in Boy Scouts, 1022s, 22 LR in general, even single shots or bolt actions. Those are a great way to get interested in shooting, and I definitely recommend you get one. No matter what level of firearm experience you have, it's good to have just a 22 LR for plinking, cheap shooting, training. People even go all the way up to competition shooting with 22 LR. We've got a Christensen Ranger 22, which has the 22 LR Bentz chambering that kind of compresses down the round a little bit. That maximizes the accuracy you get out of it, so much so that people can do competition shooting with it. There's a lot of technology that goes into the higher end 22 LRs to where even advanced rifle shooters are interested in the chambering. So I would definitely not pass up on it. As for all intents and purposes, 22 LR is a real gun. It even kills some kind of small game, so it's definitely not one to sleep on. I would get a 22 LR rifle. The next question asks, what's the absolute cheapest way to practice accuracy? My range fees eat up my coffee budget. There's actually two ways I would answer this. The first one is dry fire practice is a good thing. There's systems like the Mantis X. It's kind of like a laser dry fire practice system that you can control on your phone. It's got kind of like a little laser aiming device you put on the bottom of your pistol, or they even make rifle versions for it as well. That's really cool because when you pull the trigger, it will show you a visual graph of what direction you're pulling the firearm. That makes a huge difference in learning what movements you're doing. It's kind of hard to dispute a graph telling you how you're exactly messing up if you're not dead on accurate. That also helps you line up your sights a little bit. Some guns, especially handguns, if you're doing iron sights, some hit in the middle of the front post and some hit at the top of the front post. So you can better determine whether it's the way that you hold the gun or it's the way that you aim the gun. The Mantis X makes a good training tool. But that's not the only solution I would say to this problem. If you live not in an urban setting, like if you have a backyard, or I think legally you have to be like 250 feet away from other houses, I would buy a suppressor, especially for like handguns, and use subsonic ammo. Set up a little target in your backyard. Make sure you're aware of all your surroundings and what's beyond your target, but still, I would shoot suppressed in your backyard. That is a excellent practical way to not only shoot, but also get experience in maintaining your gun, cleaning it, disassembling it. You're actually breaking it in by doing live fire practice. Lets you handle the recoil. So all around, I think that's a more practical way. It's not a cheap choice. I mean, suppressors are going to run you anywhere from $600-700 up, plus the $200 tax stamp. But now they make multi-caliber suppressors. That's a really good solution, I would say. You're still going to be out some money in ammo. It's not really the most cost-effective solution, but as far as a practical answer, that's what I would recommend. That's a much better choice. Okay, now we're getting into more of some humorous questions. My wife thinks I'm collecting guns, not prepping for Armageddon. Can I tell her I'm actually training for Call of Duty? Sure. There's a lot of different ways to think about collecting guns. Some people do it for investment, some people do it for collection, some people do prep. There's a lot of different strategies for buying guns. We had a guy that used to come into the store, and if he saw it on a video game, he was like, I need to have it. And that actually worked as an investment strategy too, because a lot of the big name guns that were in video games became very collectible. There was one that FN Herstal FS2000. People used to call it the tuna gun because it looked kind of like a fish. Those are actually quite collectible now, and you can't buy them. They're discontinued. But one of the biggest appearances I remember for that particular gun came from Battlefield 3, the video game. I remember I used to play Battlefield 3, and I saw people using that gun. And then I realized, hey, you can buy a semi-automatic version of it. I don't know how long they offered it, but after somebody asked me about that, a couple years after that, I guess this would be 2020 or 2021, they quit making a semi-auto version. You could no longer get it. So they became quite popular and quite expensive, collectible-wise. Buying guns like you're training for Call of Duty is, you could do that. There's also people that would come in when we offered Cerakote services and say, hey, this is the Call of Duty skin or camo that I had on my gun. Can you recreate that? So there's definitely a market for that. There are very real buyers out there that buy guns with that mentality. So that's a legitimate thing, even though it's intended to be a humorous question. The next question asked, why do y'all buy suppressors so squirrels don't hear you murder acorns? So squirrels don't hear you murder acorns. I don't even know how you would murder an acorn. I don't even know how to approach that one. When I hear that, it makes me think of, there was an older gentleman that used to come into the store that used to shoot bumblebees with his 22 LR revolver that had 22 LR rat shot in it, which is kind of comical if you think, like, first of all, he was arthritic, so I don't know how effective he was at shooting that. It seemed kind of dangerous the way that he told the story. But murdering acorns, I guess, is in that kind of similar vein. The very real question is, why do you buy suppressors? When I talked earlier about it's a cheap training tool in your backyard, a lot of people just like to have if you're buying guns like it's Call of Duty, you have suppressors in Call of Duty. They sound cool when you shoot them. They don't hurt your ears. They have a practical use. It's not just for murdering acorns or even murdering anything, really. They look cool. They sound cool. They protect your ears. I like suppressors. Suppressors are fun. The next question asked, best home defense. I bought a baseball bat and a Yelp review of my neighbor's pizza place, 10 out of 10. I would not recommend a baseball bat. First off, that's too personal. If you're going, I don't even know how to approach the Yelp review portion of this question. A baseball bat, no. Get a gun, get a concealed carry gun, get your concealed carry permit. Don't buy a baseball bat for self-protection. If you're talking home defense, then you can get more like a shotgun or a rifle. Just be aware of the laws that surround personal protection. No baseball bats. That's not good. The next question is, should I get a Glock or a Glock? Wait, there are so many Glocks. There's a lot of different Glocks. There's a reason there's so many Glocks. Every Glock has a different purpose in mind. There are big Glocks, there are small Glocks, there are different caliber Glocks, there are thinner Glocks, there are wider Glocks. There are a lot of Glocks for a lot of different purposes. I would recommend a Glock. The only downside to a Glock is there's no manual safety. It wouldn't be my first choice. However, I will say I own several Glocks. So Glocks make a good gun. They knew what they were doing when they came up with the design. But there are also pretty good choices out there as well. Next question asks, my cousin thinks AR-15s are cool because they're in video games. Should I gift him one for his birthday? This is a legally trick question. You can't really gift guns, especially if it sounds like in this question someone might be potentially underage. I would be wary of that first. For rifles, you have to be 18. For handguns or AR pistols, you got to be 21. You shouldn't buy a gun with the intent to give it to somebody else. You should have a gun and then you can legally transfer it to somebody else. I did just do a video on how to do legal gun transfers. So I would be aware of what the law is, especially in your state. They may have different ways to do guns transfers. But if somebody never has had an AR, AR-15s are a great way to advance in the hobby. They're a lot louder. They make a much cooler sound. They're also modular. That's a good way to get into gunsmithing, is to have an AR-15 to learn about how guns work. Especially if you're going to do any kind of like tuning, like you learn about, earlier I talked about ballistic coefficients, twist rates, the difference in barrel lengths, how that affects your velocity. There's a lot of different aspects to AR-15s, and I would definitely recommend, if the further you get into the firearms hobby, that you get an AR-15. If you just buy it because they're cool in video games, sure, that's another reason to own one. I mean, I think the more people own an AR-15, it's better. It's great that there's a lot of following for the platform. Just be safe about it is the only thing I would say. Guns are not a toy. Especially AR-15s are also definitely not a toy. Just respect the firearm, respect the tool. The next question says, guns versus bats, which is more overrated for home defense? I'm team bat. Like I said earlier, I would not recommend a bat. Baseball bats, that seems messy to me. I would not recommend. I think a lot of people, if you've ever, picture yourself this, you go into what you realize is a hostile situation with a close quarters weapon and not a distance ranged weapon. Why would you buy a melee weapon in a life or death situation when you could be 25 feet away? Or I think in concealed carry, the average distance in which people shoot guns in a defensive scenario is like 5 feet. I would not No, there's no baseball bats. Just get a gun. A gun is way better. The next question asks, tired of people saying guns kill people? Tell that to the guy who used a gun to stop a home invasion. Um, People kill people. People will kill with anything they have. It doesn't matter if a gun is involved. People use rocks. In the UK, people use knives after they ban guns. It's down to the intent of the person. If there's a person that's intending to do you harm, it doesn't matter what kind of tool they're going to use. Guns are dangerous. You should respect guns. But at the end of the day, if someone is out to do harm, they're going to do it no matter what. You might as well be as well prepared for that as you can be. The next question asked, is it a time to ban tactical gear? It's just regular clothes with SOCOM patches now. I think people that have military patches, police patches, especially SOCOM, like special operator patches, especially at the range, especially if they're not even former military, former law enforcement, they're just like LARPing, live action roleplay. First of all, it's cringe. I don't like that. That's really cringe. Second off, that's stolen valor, I think. If you're doing it in a serious way, you think you're an operator. I've trained so much with my AR-15, my Glock, that I think I have equal training relative to these people that have trained their entire lives to be a military operator, special operations, or Delta Force. I don't think people in the civilian world can comprehend what kind of training those people have and what, especially the funding it takes to train those people. I like I said, I think that is cringe. I don't like it. The next question is, why do gun owners act like they're the only ones who can shoot straight? I've seen cats land better. I've seen cats land better. I don't know what that means. If you mean like land hits, it really depends on getting out there, training with your firearm. I've had people ask me, what's a good firearm to carry? And I said, well, I don't like to recommend small guns because if you get a smaller gun, you're never going to shoot it because it's too snappy and it'll hurt your wrist when you're shooting it. So I would recommend a bigger gun over a smaller gun because it's one you can more effectively train with and get practice and time on the range with. The best gun is the one that you'll actually use in a practice setting, even more practically in a home defense scenario if you really need it. I would get something that you're comfortable with, that you can reliably use, you know how it's going to act, and over something that you don't, especially something you've never shot. If people buy a gun, they put it up in their safe, their closet, whatever, you never shoot it, how do you know it's going to go off? How do you know it's going to fire when you need it? Is it even loaded? A lot of people keep guns, they don't have them loaded. What's going to happen when it's the moment of truth and you're in a life or death scenario? You need to have it ready. You need to know what it's going to do. I think that's some things that people that don't own guns don't really understand. The next question says, I called the cops when my neighbor fired his gun for fun. They showed up and yelled at him, and then I got a free lecture on noise ordinances. Listen, I've been in the same boat before. People shoot guns where we live now all the time. It freaks me out sometimes, even though I've been around guns forever, I am an employee at a gun store. But like when people shoot at night, that still kind of freaks me out because that could be a real situation. When people shoot a lot, like more than 3 or 5 times, I guess, that would be a potential red flag for me. Like I said earlier, when people shoot in their backyard, I think you have to be like 250 feet away. Maybe it's 500 feet away from structures. And it might be different. I think that's what I heard from North Carolina. It depends on the state, I think. But noise ordinances, if they're being a nuisance, like particularly trying to get your attention with a gun. That's a different story. If they're just kind of shooting like planking and it's a rural area, that's different. It really depends on the intent. And I think this question could be better answered for people that know their neighbors, get involved in the community. Just be aware of what's going on in your neighborhood. Especially like if you have neighbors that are also into guns, you should strike up a conversation and say, hey, we should go to the range sometime, get to know each other. That's a great way to connect with people, is over guns and saying, hey, I've got this, what do you got? Let's go shoot, that kind of thing. I wouldn't get the cops involved in that. I mean, if it is a strife kind of thing between two neighbors, like a feud, it's different, but I wouldn't. In this scenario, what it sounds like, I don't think it's a big deal. The next one says, my mom keeps saying I look intimidating in my camo pants. Does this mean I'm doing it right? That sounds pretty cringe. This is something I've never understood. People at the gun show, especially the one in Asheville, now that I'm thinking about it, they have a lot of, it's not uniforms, but it's kind of like military surplus jackets and stuff like that people would buy. This might just be down to, like earlier I said, live action role play or LARP, but you want to look intimidating. I think that might be taking it too far if you're LARPing. I don't think you should dress to be intimidating. You should be a good ambassador for guns. I'm assuming this, this person responded to one of my videos, so I'm assuming they are into guns and not just like a rebel that wants to dress in a edgy manner. My pants look intimidating. That's a new one. I've never heard that one before. The next one says, I tried to explain to my date why I can't cuddle after the shooting range. It's the safety protocol, I said. She left. The first thing that popped into my mind, and I know this is not the heart of the question, is, and I learned this at NRA rifle safety, basic rifle safety, is that after the range you have a lot of lead particulates all over your skin. And so if you heat up your skin and or sweat, those seep into your pores and can cause lead poisoning. They always said, wash your hands with cold water. And we actually made a joke out of this about make sure you use the cold water and not the hot. You'll get the lead poisoning. So if you're saying you can't cuddle after the shooting range, there's legitimate, I understand that. I don't know that I would say the same. However, there is a legitimate reason for that. Not just an emotional response, but actually a practical, real world, scientific reason that you shouldn't cuddle after the firing range. Or you take a shower, but just make sure it's cold water. Don't get hot. The next question says, my dad thinks my gun safe is for important documents. I told him it's for my tax returns. He's not dumb. Important documents. This one makes me think, to be technical, you could say it's for your tax stamps, suppressors, short barrel rifles, machine guns, any other weapons, explosive devices. That's not wrong. I have tax stamps in my safe. He might not be dumb. That could be a legitimate thing. It may not. This may not be a funny one. This might be there's not just guns. There might not be any guns. It could just be tax stamps. You never know. The next question says, why do militia TikTokers always film in parking lots? Are we practicing for a mall apocalypse? Now, I want to get into this one a little bit because I don't know anything about this situation. Maybe you can educate me in the comments. What is a militia TikToker? I've never heard this term before. I didn't even know this was a thing. There are people that are in the militia. There are people that came into the store that were part of a militia. There are people that are part of a preparedness community that would be considered a militia, I think. I don't. The other thing is, I looked at TikTok before. I didn't know that TikTok allowed guns. I don't know if that's legitimate or not. Maybe it's just a politics thing. If you talk about militia things and are anti-government, I don't understand. I don't think militia is allowed on TikTok. So somebody will have to educate me on this or tell me where I can find militia TikTok content. Second part says, are we practicing for a mall apocalypse? I wouldn't want to be in a mall if there was an apocalypse. It's going to be bad. Have you seen The Walking Dead? The mall apocalypse scenario is not fun, I don't think. The other thing that I find interesting about the mall apocalypse scenario is I've watched a lot of urban exploring videos of abandoned malls, and those are really hazardous, especially when they get dilapidated and start falling apart. You can barely walk in some because the roofs are falling apart, the electrical is falling down. That's a really dangerous place, especially if people are like ransacking it and taking everything out of the walls. It's not a fun place. I wouldn't recommend a mall apocalypse survival thing. The next question is, these are about pop culture. And I'm going to preface this with, I'm very uncultured. I've not seen a lot of movies, especially ones that were made before my time. So this might be a little bit comical. The first one says, should new gun owners watch Die Hard instead of Burn Notice? Bruce Willis is better than Nathan Fillion. Haven't watched either of them. I think I've seen maybe 5 to 10 minutes of Die Hard, so I don't know. I like Bruce Willis. He was in another movie I watched. Bruce Willis was good in Red. I think I saw both Red 1 and Red 2. That's not the one I'm thinking of. The Expendables, that's the one that I've seen. I've seen Expendables. Bruce Willis was in it. Chuck Norris was in it. That I would recommend. I like that. I think that's probably kind of like Die Hard, but I'm not sure exactly. But I like Bruce Willis. I don't know who Nathan Fillion is. Might be a perfectly good movie. Who knows? The next one says, remember when the Fast and Furious movies just had car chases? Now they've got shootouts and bullets that don't penetrate walls. Disappointed. This is something I've never understood. I know that there's a lot of Fast and Furious movies. I've not seen a single one of them. My impression of both car chases, I've seen enough cops to know that car chases don't last forever, especially not 20 movies or however many. The other thing is, I think if you're shooting rifles at cars, they get disabled very easily. Some of the videos or clips that I've seen from Fast and Furious, especially if they have fully automatics or 50 BMGs, or I think one of them had an RPG-7 in it. It seems like this would make a very short movie if it was based on realistic ballistics or the way that things actually work, especially if you start shooting a car, it's not going to last. We had access to a police range that we could go and shoot our full auto stuff that we made. And cars really don't last very long. I mean, we hit a tail light with I think it was a 45 ACP 230 grain FMJ, and it did pretty incredible amount of damage, much more than I would have thought for a car. I mean, it's built out of metal, the car shell, but it doesn't really hold up. I mean, it went through a whole door, and it was not even a plus P, I don't think. And 45 ACP is a wide projectile. So you would think that it would get caught, but it didn't. It went all the way through, that one door panel at least. So imagine rifle projectiles. I mean, that's going to cause some damage. That's going to disable a vehicle. It's not going to last more than one movie, I would think. And I think some of it is the same cast over and over. So not the most realistic movie. Maybe it looks good. The movie does. It's very action-packed, but it's certainly not realistic. The next one says, my grandma asked why I have a rifle for dinosaurs. She's not wrong. I have a rifle for dinosaurs. Like I said earlier, I have the 9.3 by 62 Mauser. That could be considered a dinosaur gun. I think on the box they say that you can take down bison, elephant is another one. Probably some dinosaurs, probably not the biggest dinosaurs, but some dinosaurs for sure. The other one I would recommend is you should watch the documentary Tremors. Tremors is a great documentary on why we need big bore rifles. I would recommend you watch that, and that will tell you why you need big bore guns. The next one says, is it illegal to name your AR-15 Azul? A-Z-U-U-L from Sonic. I'm 90% sure it's a federal crime. I don't even know who Azul is. I know what Sonic is. That is a federal crime. I don't even need to consult the registry or the logbooks for that one. No. It's like the baseball bat. Just say no. The next one, this is kind of comical. Why do gun channels always have presenting sounds? Are we expecting a bear, a zombie, Kieran with a warrant? This made me think of, for those of you that have played Fallout New Vegas, there's a particular weapon that you can get. It's maybe a revolver. When you pull it out of your holster, or you hit the button in that case, it makes a Wild West noise. And I think it's something to do with, they call it the mysterious stranger. That's the mysterious stranger noise, and that's supposed to be their gun or their firearm. That's what made me think of that. Like, if you're watching a gun video and they unholster their weapon and it makes a presenting noise, that's what it made me think of from that video game. It says, are we expecting a bear, a zombie, or a Kieran with a warrant? That could be a level of cringe, a presenting noise, especially in the real world. Bring it back to LARP. That's what I think of when I hear that. I have intimidating pants. I'm going to remember that one. So that's been some of the questions that I have received over the years. It's been, I don't even know how long, 5, 6, 7 years since we started this channel. I've got some more saved up. We'll go through at some point. If you have funny questions, humorous and or practical or utilitarian questions you want to ask me, feel free to leave me a comment here. You can email me. You can send a smoke signal, whatever you prefer. As always, thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe.